we're going to put our piece of cardboard on there. And this cardboard is actually professional cut, so it is all squared up, doesn't look like a hobbyist thing. And then we're going to take our heated build bed, and if you look, not only are there two sides of it where we want the line side up, okay, but we also want the wire, you know, the little tail that it looks like, with the soldered pieces to the back. So all tails go to the back, you know, just kind of like an animal. We're going to put that on there. Now this part here gets a little bit trickier, and here's what the tricky part is that while you are using these 25mm screws, we're not going to use a washer on the top of the head, so we can actually go ahead and stick that through there. But what we are going to do is we're going to stack up a stack of 6 washers on top of each other. So we're going to take 6 of these washers each time. We're going to do that 4 times, each for the 4 corners. And I thought about using a single standoff, but the truth is you kind of want washers, and the reason is because if you ever want to add, make it taller, add a little bit more, you've got another, you know, exact size piece to put in there for insulation. That way it would run the underside of this much cooler. You never know what kind of plastics we're going to use in the future. Very few people are able to predict all of that. So what we want to do with the washers, remember I said that one side is curvy and the other side is flat. Well, what we want to do is we want to have the curved side and the flat side of the curved side of one hit the flat side of the other. It doesn't really matter too much, and stack them 6 tall. Before we get to finishing up and putting the screws and the last of the washers and the last of the nuts on there, then what we're going to do is we're going to go back and remember, we put a double set of nuts on here. We need to actually finish this and put the double set of nuts there. So these are 2 that we actually want to go ahead and finish them up. So we're going to actually put a little bit more force on them. And the reason for doing this is it's easier to actually do this while you have access to the screw heads. We're not going to have access to the screw heads on the back side of these 2 when we actually go through and we mount it up on onto the machine. What we're going to do is a little bit of a trick using you know, both the needle nose pliers and the wrench, so that we actually hit them all on the same side. So anyway, but while we've got access to it, we're going to use our wrench, tighten this up a little bit, and we only want the last nut. We don't want the first one. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of hold that there and put our Allen wrench there while we're holding it, and cause this to actually twist. And we're more interested in actually moving the wrench itself than moving the Allen wrench, because the Allen wrench is already pretty tight. So I don't know if you can see that, but we're actually just trying to only turn the top nut. That's pretty much good enough. So we're going to do the same thing here. Make sure that's tight, finger tight, before we put a wrench to it. Put the wrench on there, and we tighten it just a little bit. That's enough to cause the second nut to be a jam nut, and it actually holds it on there really well. So okay, so there's that. And then before we go ahead and put our washers and mount the cardboard and the heated bed on there, one of the things that we want to do is go back and put the cardboard down for now. Make sure the line side's up, and then we're going to actually flip it so there is no solder on both sides of here. This is all the smooth side. We're going to put that down, and we're going to mount our thermistor. So this is our thermistor wire. We need to actually get this taken care of. That's kind of why we have the capped on tape. So we're going to, first thing we're going to do is we're going to insulate one of these 2 leads. If you want to, you can insulate both of them, but we're not actually going to capped on tape over top of this bead yet. So all we're trying to do is just insulate these 2, keep them from actually touching each other. That would be very bad, because it'd give you, you know, either an intermittent problem where the controller would see it as needing a lot of extra voltage, or it would short it, and if you're lucky, the controller will give you an error and flag you and tell you to shut the whole thing down, that there's a problem. If you're not, it would actually tell the temperature to ramp up because it's way too cold, and that would keep your heat bed on full high. I think all told, you'd be lucky to be able to get 140 degrees centigrade out of it, but still, that's pretty hot. It's more than enough to start damaging the bottom side of your plastic parts and making them look a little weird. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a long enough piece of Kapton tape that's going to be able to cover, basically the full wire. And so we're going to slice it with the razor. And you got to be very careful. If you need to, put it on the table, but don't get your fingers trapped in between the razor and the tape, because your fingers will lose. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to take one of the wires. It doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to do the one that's kind of straight, and we're going to slice this right in between. And once we get it in there, we're just going to fold it over. Try and put it in a little bit of tension. Okay, we fold it over. If we've got enough left over, then what you can do is you can actually fold the whole thing back over on itself and capture the other wire also. What you want is it to remain pretty flat, but also not touch each other. So now there's no way that those two wires can actually touch each other because they've been pretty much insulated pretty good in there. And then we're going to actually take this and put it up in here. And first we're going to actually remove this wire tie. We might wire tie it later just to take care of it, but we're going to get rid of the wire tie and straighten out all of our wires. Get rid of all the little kinks and stuff, because soon enough we're going to actually wire tie this together. Okay, now if you see, I didn't actually put the Kapton tape on the bead itself. And sometimes if you're lucky, the beads will actually have a flat side or another. This one actually seems to be perfectly round. So what we're going to do is that if you look on there, when this is the bottom side up, we want to have this on this side here. And what I want is somewhere in there. It doesn't really need to be all the way up here. It doesn't really need to be too far, in the middle. I always kind of put a little off center and a little bit back. And the reason is because it changes the diameter when you go into the full outer covering of this. So what I'm going to do is actually Kapton tape this over like a couple times this way, a couple times that way. And what that'll do is keep that glass bead as close to this board as possible. So let me put this down here. And once again, use the razor blade and snip off a little bit of Kapton tape. Okay, so trying to show you here, I put it right about there. I mean, somewhere in there is pretty good. And all you're trying to do is get as accurate a temperature reading as you can. The way to do that is to keep that glass bead as close to possible on there. So we're going to actually clip off a couple more of these things and put them on there. And all that is just to keep it, as tight up against there as possible. Chances are this would be more than good enough, but I like to be safe on it. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take another long piece. The longer of the two. We're just going to kind of sandwich it on there. And if it sticks out a little bit from the circuit board, that really isn't going to hurt, but I usually like to keep it so that you really can't see it too well. So anyway, we're going to put that one on. Then we'll put one crossways here. And that way it gets acts as a little bit of insulation for our glass bead thermistor. And you see, it's on there pretty good. So now what we've got is we've got the circuit board bed ready to go. And what we need to do is we keep our little cardboard there. We can put the cardboard there later, or we can put it before. If you look, that glass bead, the cardboard actually helps press the glass bead there. Plus it adds a little bit more insulation to it. So anyway, we're going to put this a little bit off to the side right now. And we're going to go and start putting on our screws. So once again, all of the tails to the back. So you got this to the back, this to the back, and that to the back. And what we're going to do is we take our 25mm screw 25, and it's actually an M3 1/2 by 25, so 25 is the length of that. And we're going to put both of these screws on the top. We'll start off with the top side first and just kind of slide them all the way through the circuit bed here. Be nice to be able to do all 4, but I can't juggle that great. 2 works out pretty good. And then on top of that, recall we're going to put 6 washers. And make sure that the 6 washers, when you put them there, you either have all the round side up or all the flat side up, or the sharp side up. We're kind of being careful while we look there. Get these on here. We're up to 5. One more is 6. There we go. Okay, so we're going to actually kind of put that, if we can, into the hole there. Good deal. Now let's do the second one here. So we kind of hold it, and once again, count out 6 washers and put them on there. If you lose a washer, it's no big deal. There's at least 10 extra, I think, in the kit. So 1 or 2 falling to the floor is not going to cause us to stop for anything. Okay, so there's 6 for that side. And once again, kind of see if we can figure out. There we go. Slide those through. Usually at this time what I'll do is I will actually put the washer on the back side. Once again, doesn't matter whether it's the flat side up or down because it's a single washer. And we're going to put a nut there. So, and we're just going to kind of see if we can get that thing to tighten up. A little bit. Okay, that's good enough for that. All we want to do is just kind of ensure that it stays on there right now. That one kind of was a little hard. I think it had a little bit of sawdust in it. Put another washer on this side, and we're going to put another nut there. That one's a little bit easier. So when you look at the stack here, you have a screw go through the heated bed with the line side up. Then you have 6 washers. Then you have your plywood bed. Then you have another washer. And then you have finally your nut. So that's pretty much the stack of all 4 corners are going to be the exact same. So let's go ahead. We're going to tighten this up a little bit more. And then we're going to flip it around. And right now, it's not such a big deal to have all these cables and cords out here. You don't really want to pull on it very hard because if you do, we don't have any strain relief yet connecting all of this. So we want to be a little bit careful with that. So we put the screw in there. We find ourselves trying to, without tightening it up too tight, you can actually kind of fish the washers, onto the nut. So let's put our 6 washers on there. If you want to, you can actually go ahead and all washers are slightly off. I mean, they're not the exact same thickness because they just use a cheap stock of steel to actually make them, and then they stamp them out. And so if you wanted to, you could take your stack of 6, measure them with calipers, and find out the right combination so that they're all the exact same. It'd be good, but it's not necessary. I can show you either way at the end how to get those. So here is number 3. We go ahead and put our washer on the back side, and we put a nut on the back side. That one went on pretty good. Okay, 3 down, 1 to go. The last one here, what we want to do before we actually put the last one in there, we want to actually slide our cardboard in there because it's easy to do so long as we can flex this, but it's very hard once it's on there. There's not a real big advantage having the cardboard one way or the other. I'm just going to put it in sideways like this, if I can. If you have to, you can actually flare out the circuit board pretty good to get that in there. What you want is, you want it so that it almost barely touches each one of each one of the washer stacks, okay? But you don't want it actually really to touch the washer stacks, okay? And if you look, once it's all said and done, it actually fits in pretty good. So let's take our final screw for this assembly, put it in there, and 6 more washers. And you can flare it out a little bit. I mean, you're not going to hurt circuit boards. They're pretty tough. This one doesn't have any, surface mount components, other than the wires that we have on there. When you finally get to the last one, it's a little bit more difficult to do it this way, or to get it on there, but it's certainly easier than trying to load a full stack of 6 in there and then not trying to knock them all over and then play fishing games with them. So okay, so we're up to 5. We need 1 more and we'd be good. And finally, the last one. Last one, we're just going to barely fish it in there. Okay, now you got to find the hole and finger tighten it till you can shove it through there. One last washer. And finally, the last nut. And that pretty much completes all the mechanical assembly. We're going to tighten these up before we forget about it. And once again, you don't actually have to use the wrenches, or the adjustable wrench. You can use just the needle nose pliers to hold the backside of it. And so we're going to do that. Later on, there is a little bit of flexibility and give in the plywood, in that if you keep tightening this down, eventually you can actually pull, almost pull the nut right straight through it. And so we're going to go through and tighten these up. We want it pretty tight. What we're going to try and do at the same time is use our little wrench to keep the washers all lined up. That kind of gives it a cool little effect, like a pylon stack. Okay, that's pretty tight, good enough. So we're going to go ahead, do the same one. This one for some reason didn't want to go on so easy, but it did. So we're going to hold that. We're going to keep tightening this one up. And once it gets almost cinched up there, we're going to do the same thing where we take our wrench and we're going to kind of push that stack of washers so that they look like a nice stack of pylons, like we intended it to be that way, and we did. And by using washers, if you wanted to, you could space it even more by keeping using washers, by stacking up more, and then you could actually go through and put a second stack of cardboard in there if you wanted to. You don't have to, but if you wanted to, you could. Let's go ahead and take care of this one. And same deal. That one kind of lined up all by itself. We didn't even really have to straighten it out. So once in a while you do get lucky. And make sure that this one is tight, because after we tighten up all the others, we want to make sure all of them are tight. I'll need a little bit. And I'm going back through each one of them just to make sure. Yep, they're all tight. Okay, so now what we have are now the wire ties, and one of them just kind of fell off of there, which we kind of expected it. We didn't expect it. Good news, we got more than enough wire ties, so we're going to actually fish that one through. The reason I wasn't so worried about it before is that it's very easy. It's on the edge of this, and so you just push it through there, and there it goes. This wire tie is probably the most important wire tie of all of them, because it actually is the strain relief for our wires here, our heat bed wires. And if you don't put this wire tie on there, it's a given. You use your printer, eventually these will pull off. What I did is I modified the board so that it actually gives a longer soldering area for the wires on there, but it also keeps the wires on this side and gives you a little bit bigger heat bed, using just a standard stock mirror that we like to use. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run this down this way, but what we want to do is put this wire tie as tight as we can possibly get it, because we don't want it to flex or give at all. Okay, so on this one, you only want the heat bed wires in there. This is kind of my own little doing. I've never seen any other RepRap that actually puts a wire tie there, but they should. And then one of the things that you see a lot on different RepRap printers is they actually leave these two wires out as one big loop on the back side. And so the problem is you keep pulling and tugging this thing, and they don't even put a strain relief on here. They rip these out eventually. There's not a chance that it'll ever last without doing it. And it means that you actually have to have your printer that much farther away from the wall. And so what I've done is I've changed this around so that we are actually going to run it up underneath. If you look at the printer, that we've run this right here up underneath the bed and then back around this center pole. On the design that you're going to get from Kickstarter and all the new revision of the Vision 3D printer, I've actually moved this threaded rod, instead of being at the bottom in line with these three, we've moved it 1.5 inches up, and by doing that, it runs in the middle of here, so it changes it a little bit, but not much. It gives a much cleaner line if you look at it, from the side, so it looks kind of cool that way. And anyway, but if you look, I put wire ties, the first initial wire ties, and then I've actually put individual wire ties that tie the two wires together. The two wires, I mean, it's actually two wires in this and then two wires in that, but the two cables together so that they will actually wrap really good as you're actually, allowing this to go back and forth. If you can look from the side, then what that will do is that keeps this, all in line, and that puts almost zero force on the back of the board here. So what we're going to do, we need to have these two wire ties done next, and so what I'm going to try and do is I snake this one behind because it's a little more flexible, and what it's going to do is it's going to kind of stay in there in what's called the interstitial position behind this, in the gap that kind of leaves, and that kind of holds that together. So we're going to go ahead, put these wire ties together here, and if that kind of escapes, it's no big deal. We're going to tighten it up and then pull it back and tighten it again, and we keep doing that till it's really, really tight. Okay. Now what I usually do is I actually kind of force the head of the wire tie off to the side there, and so that's done. You can either use the razor blades to cut it, or you can use your needle nose pliers. And what we want to do is clean these up. Some people wait till the end. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I do it where I do it during the middle. But we're just going to clip those all off of there. And if it leaves a little bit of a stub to it, it's no big deal. So I do like having a clean assembly as it's going along. So let's do the third one that's on this board itself. And we're just going to kind of like push these off together. It doesn't matter if you have them sideways like that or if you have them stacked on top of each other. I'm going to try and do them sideways. So we're going to, I guess it likes it the other way. So we're going to keep ratcheting this until it doesn't have any more give, and so you can't hear it tighten up anymore. And we're going to use our needle nose pliers again. Cut those off. Try not to cut the wires. Okay. Now, for the rest of this, let's get this out of the way. And then for the rest of these, what we're going to do is we're going to try and keep these two together, and we're going to go through and wire tie those all together. And you got plenty of wire ties, so now's the time to use them. Moving wires definitely require more wire ties than stationary wires, so any of the wires that are attached to any of the motors where the motor physically moves on the machine, which would be the X-axis motor moves, Y-axis doesn't, but by doing that we're going to actually keep wire tying these together, and if you keep the head off to the side, you usually can get these so that it looks like a cable of 3 going across. So we're going to do that a couple of times. It doesn't really matter, you know, the frequency, so long as you don't go, you know, like almost a foot and then try and wire tie one there and wire tie one here. What you want to do is wire tie it enough that those stay together. A little bit of a gap here and there, it's not a big deal. It's not a game changer. It's not going to do much of anything. But when you get a huge gap, you know, like if you're back over here, then the wires become kind of having a mind of their own. They start really causing trouble because they can catch on things, they can get, you know, wrapped around things, and when that happens, it's only a matter of time you're going to break down a machine. So we're going to tighten this one up. Same deal. Where we go through, we're going to tighten this one up. Same deal. Where we go through, and if you look, there's 2. And if you leave them loose, you can do a bunch of them and then kind of like tighten them up later. So we're going to tighten that one up pretty good. And if you really want to tighten up wire ties, you can always use your needle nose pliers. So needle nose pliers, and you can pull it as tight as you want to. Right now we're just kind of getting these, you know, generally tightened up. We're going to go through, I'm going to put it down on the table and do, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 more of these, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so a couple more wire ties and we're done with the assembly. Now just go ahead and clip off all the rest of the wire ties. And that is the heated build bed for the Vision 3D printer. I leave the last little bit of it. I can wire tie it later. Generally, what I do like to do is I like to keep these 2 wires the exact same length. If you want to, you can always shorten this up by clipping it and then slicing it a little bit and then stripping the wires off, just in case you want to shorten these. Having these as short as possible is really kind of nice because they are a power wire. Having this one, you know, this length, I've already got the connector on there. If you wanted to, you could like wire tie it together to shorten it up, so no need to clip that. But anyway, there you go. That is how you get the Vision 3D printer heated build plate. And once we get it on the final assembly for this, then we're actually going to show you how to put in the smooth rods. We're going to actually tighten up the 4 bolts that we left on here. And then we're going to show you how to snake the wires around so that they're good, ready to go into the controller. So there you have it. This is one of the original machines. It's actually held up pretty well, I think. It's got a little bit of wires under there, but it's held up really well in production, and it's getting an upgrade. There you go.